Hello and welcome to this lesson on a particular kind of sentence correction that you may be familiar with, the ones that are really lengthy underline sections. So we're going to begin just by talking about how frequently you'll see these, and roughly 25% to 33%, a quarter to a third of all the sentence corrections would probably be qualified as long underlines. Now, they're no harder or easier than other sentence corrections. They're just longer, and even with that said, they still need to take about the same amount of time. So the strategic implications here are that you've got to maintain that overall minute 30 per sentence correction average and 2-minute maximum, and honestly, you don't really want to be approaching that maximum. You have to treat these sentence corrections with the same timing construct so that you've got enough time left for the critical reasoning and reading comprehension questions that do just involve more reading. So we're going to focus on details here and not get bogged down rereading the sentences over and over again. Now, you have to allow that single reread maximum before choosing to eliminate guess and move on. Because, again, if you just keep reading it for understanding, you're wasting time ultimately. It has to be relatively apparent what the issue is. And we'll talk about how to get there in a moment. You're going to want to first focus on the intended meaning to note any logical incoherency in the original sentence. And if there is a logical incoherency, you want to jump on it quickly. And then you're going to seek the biggest and smallest common errors in the choices. So the biggest are going to involve modifying phrases, and the smallest are usually pronouns and articles. So literal, like, two-letter words like ors, or he's, or its, and those are the kinds of things that you want to fixate on, small details, and especially pronouns or articles and modifying phrases, because when they change, that may indicate a change in meaning, like from and to or. You can't do that. So let's take a look at a sample here on the left-hand side. So before we do anything, we're still going to read the sentences as written, like we would every sentence correction, and try to note intended meaning and top 3 issues of subject-verb agreement, verb tense, and pronouns or articles. So you really need to just do what you do normally, but potentially look for specific long underline common issues. So you want to use, of course, any non-underlined portion to inform those issues affecting the underlined portion. And you have to remember that choice A is always the same as the underlined original. Now, here's the important part. Focus on one issue at a time to simplify your evaluation and avoid fully rereading each choice as you go, because that's where you waste the time. Now, you'll also want to attempt to proactively identify the main subject in your sentence as written to confirm proper subject-verb agreement. So, you'll also note that the proper number for the subject and verb has to match. So generally, one in the pair will conclude in S. So here, we need to ensure that our main subject connects to a main verb to create a complete sentence as written. That's what makes a sentence. A sentence is subject-verb agreement. So here, we're talking about how in the maize-deficient regions in the north, maize, and so maize is the subject, still importantly, making up a smaller share of food intake, so households in these regions supplement maize with other starchy staples such as cassava and banana, and, well, maize never did anything. So if there's no main verb, you can eliminate the original as a fragment. This is a not entirely uncommon tactic for longer underlined sentences, is they don't actually make up a sentence because you don't have a subject-verb pair. So beware of that, especially with longer underlines. Now, let's say, however, you cannot identify an error in the original sentence as written. Then you want to seek 2-3 splits in the choices informing possible issues to evaluate. And we've got 3 options here that say in the north, and we've got 2 options that say while it's still important. So let's just think about whether we should start our underline portion with in the north or while still important. So we focus on the details to determine which phrase is properly ordered in the sentence to describe the information as intended. And we have to always default to the original for questions of meaning, and it says that regions are in the north, and that's as intended, so it has to be that our answer choice, the correct one, must begin with in the north, because it's not that the regions, while still important, it's that the regions are intended to be in the north. So immediately eliminate 2 choices for this one modifier issue, because the descriptor is in the wrong place. Now, you can also recognize that long sentences often have multiple issues to evaluate in each choice. So that means if you cannot evaluate one difference in the choices, seek another issue. So we've got another 2-3 split. We've got cassava versus cassavas at the end of these answer choices. So again, you have to return to the original to correctly match the underline. And it says 1 banana. So banana matches cassava, which allows us to eliminate B and E, as you just saw. So we also originally had A and D out. So those were gone for those other reasons that we saw. Just read the choice back into the sentence to ensure it captures the intended meaning of the original. And you note that we didn't actually reread this during all of these answer choices. So in the maize-deficient regions in the north, maize, while still important, makes up a smaller share of food intake, so households in these regions supplement maize with other starchy staples such as cassava and banana. That all matches. So our correct answer is choice C. So you can see there are a lot of little steps that you want to complete with these longer underlines rather than trying to just reread, and listen for the errors that are very hard to recognize when you're just kind of listening for them. So step 1 is, of course, to do what we always do with sentence corrections: deliberately read the full sentence while attempting to identify and articulate a common error in the original as written. Step 2 is then going to be, if an error is identified, eliminate A and any other choices that repeat the category of error. But if no error is identified, as always, keep choice A and seek small differences in those other choices to identify common errors as reasons to eliminate. Again, oftentimes you can focus on the biggest and the smallest errors with long underline sentence corrections. Step 3 is going to be to keep evaluating those choices for certain specific errors, possibly using those 2-3 splits. Definitely remember to look for those 2-3 splits, not just at the beginning, but also at the end of the choices, until only one choice remains potentially error-free, at which time you'll read your selection back into the sentence to ensure it captures the intended meaning of the original. So those are our steps for the long underline sentence corrections. Let's go ahead and move over to the whiteboard to take a look at another example there. All right, so we can see we've got quite a lengthy sentence correction here. So as always, we're going to set up our scratch pad, and I'm actually going to have to increase the thickness on my pen. This thing is so zoomed out. So we've got A, B, C, D, E here, and we're going to read this through and try to identify an error in the original as it's written. And when we do that, we're going to have to go very deliberately, make sure that everything connects properly, especially with those top 3 errors: subject-verb agreement, verb tenses, and pronouns or articles. So, held for the first time ever in Alaska, the Western Forest Insect Work Conference hosted entomologists and forest health specialists. Okay, just stopping here. Held for the first time ever in Alaska, this conference, okay, that's what's being held, and the conference hosted entomologists and forest health specialists from universities and private industry across the western United States and Canada. All of these things make sense. Then experts, meaning the entomologists and the specialists, particularly interested in several breakout sessions with an Alaska focus, including 2 sessions on spruce beetles. Okay. There's nothing wrong here that jumps out at the outset, and we've kind of tested each of the bits as we move along to make sure that all the modifiers align. So then we want to look to the answer choices to see what is changing and see if anything jumps out as a reason to eliminate. So just skimming, we can see that there is a change in our choices relating to the beginning, right? It's not a 2-3 split, but there is definitely something changing about the introduction. So choice B says, the Western Forest Insect Work Conference held in Alaska. Okay, that's held in Alaska, that's fine. For the first time ever in Alaska, entomologists and forest health specialists. This is not the first time they've ever been in Alaska, I don't think. So this is how you want to eliminate. Go quickly and say, that's a modifier error, and now I know we can focus on absurd modifiers. So we're going to just immediately begin interrogating every modifier in every choice as we go. So we'll keep B for now, though, because it got past the first test. Right now, in Alaska for the first time ever. Okay, again, that's fine, kind of. And then the Western Forest Insect Work Conference hosted entomologists and health specialists from universities and private industry across the Western United States and Canada, held for the first time ever in Alaska. Oh my. Western United States and Canada are in Alaska. That's not going to fly. So again, that's an absurd modifier that we can eliminate immediately. So now, with A, B, and D, we'll continue looking for that modifier issue to start. And so, going back just to B, the Western Forest Insect Work Conference held in Alaska for the first time hosted entomologists. Okay, again, this is all fine, and forest health specialists from Western United States and Canadian universities and private industry. They were particularly interested in several breakout sessions with an Alaska focus, such as 2 sessions on spruce beetles. Again, modifier-wise, this seems okay. Then for D, in Alaska for the first time ever, the Western Forest Insect Work Conference held entomologists and forest health specialists. Okay. Yeah, sometimes these will just make you laugh. Because did the conference hold them? Like, I don't know, caressing softly or, as it like prisoners. That's logically absurd. And with these longer underlines, you'll often find this type of logical absurdity where you're just like, that is not what they're intending to say at all. Now, with choices A and B, though, we said that absurd modifier, there didn't seem to be anything logically absurd in the modification for B. So we've got to change gears. And in this case, we can look for our other common error for long underlines, which is this word right here. We've got a they. And that they is way too far from my subject. Because the conference is an it. The entomologists and specialists are being hosted, so they are actually objects. So they shouldn't be a they. And anyway, we've got these universities that are separated here. So this is going to be an absurd pronoun. And by process of elimination, because I don't necessarily expect you to believe that choice A is a really great answer, or the sentence as written is really all that clear. But if we reread it, just to confirm the intended meaning, held for the first time ever in Alaska, the Western Forest Insect Work Conference hosted entomologists and forest health specialists from universities and private industry across the Western United States and Canada, experts particularly interested in several breakout sessions with an Alaska focus, including 2 sessions on spruce beetles. It logically follows, and that's our correct answer as written, which is going to be the case about 20% of the time. And the last thing I'll leave you with here is to remember that even though they might hope that we care about these differences between a long dash and a semicolon, those are not issues that the exam is going to test. Remember that punctuation is not tested as a primary issue on the exam, so we didn't care about any of those the differences between semicolons and a long dash, and honestly, either could work if the other pieces of this were correctly ordered and correctly articulated. So never find yourself concerned with pronouns and with punctuation unnecessarily. So go ahead and apply these techniques for long underlines in your own sentence correction practice moving forward.